All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Before we get started, this is my actual third attempt to make this video. I've done it two separate times, got through the entire thing, downloaded it, did all that fancy, nice new stuff, and then it never uploaded to YouTube. Never did it. I've done this so many times now, and I feel like, it kind of feels like a regular school day where I give this 5 different times. But we're gonna do our best to hopefully have this one make it up. We'll see. So let's get started. So trade relations. So we've already talked about imperialism in Africa. We've talked about imperialism in colonization. In India, we're going to talk about colonization, but like imperialism now in China. And this one is just more of like spheres of influence because we talked about how they can do imperialism, colonization, spheres of influence. This one's a spheres of influence. So some background. So prior to this, the Chinese government did a real swell job of making sure that they had some strong balance with other nations, and this was because they had some really favorable negotiations. They basically opened up only select places that Europeans could trade. So they really were in charge of the where, the how, the why, and the when, and for the most part, not really the what, but they had it going on. Okay. And the reason why they were able to do that is because they had porcelain, they had tea, they had silk, they had gold, they had silver, they had all the nice stuff that the elites in Europe wanted. And because they had all that nice stuff and it was super spendy, they had a surplus, whereas Europeans had a deficit when they sold. So when to understand the difference between a surplus and a deficit, think of it as like surplus plus, it means you're positive in terms of what you import and export. So when you import, you bring it in. When you export, you get rid of it. So export is you sell it. So and import is when you're buying it. To have a surplus, you are selling more than you're buying, and when you have a deficit, you are buying more than you're selling. Okay, I hope that is pretty clear for you. Right now, America has a deficit. A lot of places have deficit. The more advanced nations tend to have deficits, and the less advanced nations tend to have surpluses right now. However, as y'all know, studying the Chinese dynasty for a couple of weeks, y'all know that sometimes they had really strong governments, and they were coming out with a swing with both fists. They were strong. Another time, not so much. This is one of those times where the relationship they start to go into a period of decline. They don't have the same strength that they once had, and as a result of this decline, Europe's also doing this because their industrial revolution. So where it might have been pretty balanced, now you're seeing Europe up here and they're starting to go down here. So this difference here, this is creating a huge imbalance. Not only their trades impacts because of this, but merchants are selling opium to the Chinese. Opium is produced mostly in Afghanistan. As right now, it is illegal because it can be used in certain illegal drugs. I believe that it is also used in some legal drugs. Um, I don't really know 100%, but I do know that it's super addictive, so don't do it. Um, but they're starting to sell this to the Chinese, and this is causing a lot of silver because they have to buy it, right? So this is causing a lot of silver to leave, and as a result of this, they're outlawing it. They're like, nah. The Chinese officials are like, no more opium. This is bad. We're going to start executing these drug dealers because this stuff is ridiculous. And Britain obviously is going to be like, yo, bro, what do you mean we can't sell this? And they're like, dude, we tell you can't sell this because it's bad. It's a drug. And they're like, it's trying to stop us. This is super profitable for us. I'm like, yo, dude, no. And as a result, you had a war. Okay, it's the Opium War. Okay, um, when you're fighting, right? Britain is way more advanced. Not only are they way more advanced, they've had a few more wars under their belt recently. And so the Chinese warships are no match for the British warships. it would be like, all right, it's kind of like when Gonzaga plays University of Washington basketball. Like University of Washington doesn't stand a chance. You know, Gonzaga just has too much firepower. They're too good. Unfortunately, Britain was too good at fighting wars, and they had Britain had a W, right? Just like Gonzaga always gets their W, Britain had a W. For those of you that like UW, you weren't even alive last time they beat Gonzaga. What's up? Anyway, so some of the results, they're forced to sign this treaty. Basically, this treaty is they had to pay for the losses that the British suffered. So they had to pay for all the war. Um, and this, and they also have to basically accept that British subjects in China aren't subject to Chinese law. What I mean by that is British subjects can follow British law in China. So it's not really beneficial for losing this war was another blow to China. Additionally, a second war resulted in China being forced to open all ports to Christian missionaries. Going back to what I said about the three Gs, y'all really need to, if you need to like figure out like, why did they go over there, think of the three Gs and you will find you will find a reason. Was it glory? Did they want to stake their claim? Like Pizarro over in the New World, right? He wanted to be remembered, things like that, as well as he wanted gold, right? So there's two G's. And he wanted to influence Catholicism. Well, here's definitely gold and definitely God right here, okay? So after that, we have this revolt, and it's caused by two major things, as you can read them right there. Didn't maintain their irrigation system as a result, led to massive flooding. Um, the flooding ruins crops, right? You ruin crops, you're going to have a famine. You don't have enough food to feed every person. Eventually, people will die from it. And additionally, not only are you losing your livelihood because you can't sell crops, you don't have enough food to feed, and then the imperial court, which lived like King Louis, right? Think about that. They living like King Louis, got everything. They're imposing more taxes on people that can't even feed or make a living, feed themselves or make a living. So those things are result in a rebellion. You see it in France. You see it here. You can see it literally anywhere. In a weird way, it's happening right now. Not like this exact stuff. I'm saying like lack of food, lack of strong like government can lead to rebellions. I believe is happening down in South America and a few different countries right now. So, um, but that's for another day, in another class. Results of this one though is the imperial forces put down the rebellion, but at the cost of a minimum 20 million, up to 30 million people. For context, for y'all, Washington's about 6 to 7 million people. Oregon's about 5 to 6 million people. So if you add Washington, Oregon, and then you have to add Idaho, Montana, and Hawaii, and probably Wyoming because they're not that many people. Like that's maybe going to get you to 20 million. Okay, it's a lot of people. Um, so the results of this rebellion got some people thinking. Some of the leaders they were talking like, okay, maybe we should think about reform, right? They're thinking, well, we should. They started to translate these works, these Western ideas, and these Western thought and industries, and they're thinking, maybe we should go towards that. But on the other side, you have your traditional conservative Confucianism scholars are saying like, no, this has been tried and true. We need to. It's good. It's Western works are contradictory, or they go against your Confucianism thought. So as a result, like we can't do that. Well, so you have them kind of like button heads, right? And in the late 1800s, the Empress is saying, "We're committed to Confucianism. I'm oppose this progress, this Western idea, this Western thought." Um, so And here we go. So while this is happening and Britain is getting more and more power, what was Japan doing, right? Because we've talked about some of the more ancient and strong countries. Well, what's Japan doing? Well, while China's not accepting Western tech, Japan's kind of adopting that technology because they see an opportunity, right? They see an opportunity to do a little bit what Britain is doing in China. Um, Historically, China and Japan kind of butt heads, just like historically the French and the British butt heads. This competition and wanting to create an empire in China leads to a war, and China takes another loss. They lose Taiwan to Japan. Okay, they don't exactly have. They've already been losing. They've had millions of people dying from famine. There's rebellions. Like they're not in a good place to have a rebuttal, basically, or to fight back. Um, and unfortunately for China, they are showing lots of weakness. They're showing lots of weakness. Those to the British, those into the Japanese. So other European powers are like, can we get a piece of that? And so they're trying to get a piece of that. And as they move in, they're getting some concessions. They have to make some concessions, and concessions. I'm not talking about those like $300 Coke and popcorns that you get at Regal Cinema, right? Nah, I'm not talking about that type of concession. This one we're talking about, it's like a special economic concession given to a foreign power. Okay, these are not necessarily bad or good, because there's concessions that the U.S. makes for like Canada, for instance, different power, like different foreign entity, but they make concessions because they can be mutually beneficial, right? Going back to your biology, right? Um, there's some mutually beneficial relationships, and then there's like a parasitic relationship. These are more like parasitic relationships because Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and Japan are getting a little bit more of these. They're getting more benefits than they're bringing to China, right? China is losing its power, it's losing its resources, it's losing its wealth, and not really getting anything out of it. So there's different spheres of influence now within China. And if you notice on here, um, you Hong Kong is became under British rule up until I can't remember if it's I think it's the late 90s. I want to say like 1990 something. I'm not 100% positive, but it was under British rule, so for quite a long time. And that's why Hong Kong is. I wouldn't like again. I've never been there personally, but from my reading and understanding, it is different than the city itself is historically a little different now, and culturally a little different now than some of the other, like Beijing, for instance. And I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, if you know this, you let me know. But I believe, from what I understand, is it is a little different now, and it has a little bit to do with this. Actually, probably a lot of it to do with this. Um, so here we go. 100 days of reform. So reformers in China blame conservatives for China's lack to look ahead. They're like, yo, y'all saw this. Y'all are crazy. So insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, the exact same way, but expecting a different result. And they're saying, you did the exact same thing over and over and over again, and you're hoping that nothing different would, like, hoping something different would happen. Well, nothing happened. So we need to look ahead. So a young emperor is like, yo, we need to get this reform going on. What he's thinking is, okay, if I modernize bureaucracy being government, if I modernize the military, if I modernize schools, if I modernize industry, look a little bit to the west, see what they're doing, see why they're successful, then maybe we can turn the tide here. Okay, but the empress, she is she takes control from the she retakes control, executes, stops the reform, and nothing really happens from here, right? So it's trying to do it, but not successful. So Boxer Uprising, this is actually a band as well. So a band named after a historical event, which is pretty cool. But anyway, if you want, it's a like indie alternative, and they're quite good. So look them up if you are so inclined. But anyway, in the 1900s, in 1900s, secret society, much like the Illuminati, but anyway, they launched what they were trying to do is basically get rid of all the foreigners from China, get rid of them, force them out. So as they're doing this Boxer uprising, that's what they're called, right? Boxers. They attacked foreigners all across China, right? They're trying to get rid of them. And then the Western powers had to basically Infinity Gauntlet it, like team up and stop them, and they were successful at stopping the Boxer uprising. But this is like a great way of showing that they really didn't want them there. It's not like they asked the British and they asked the Germans and they asked the Japanese to like, hey, can y'all come in here and exert your dominance? They didn't want them there. Um, so some results that we have: forced to grant concessions to foreigners, right? So forced to basically play the game according to the rules of the foreigners. So not really uh, a fair international trade for them. This is negative, right? Definitely not good for them. Conservatives began to recognize the need for reform. This is a big one, right? So historically, Confucianism's what we've done has worked. Let's keep it up. They're starting to understand that, you know what, this is not beneficial for us. This is problematic. We need to start thinking about accepting some of the other ideas that have been successful. And like that's why Europe is so successful right now. Like they ain't looking back. They ain't looking to the 1500s. They're looking to the future. Um, and so the conservatives are starting to realize this. School stress science and maths instead of Confucianism. Um, yeah, so I guess the original, the OG STEM movement, uh, right here, right? So thinking about the tech instead of the philosophy here, and being to expand economically and a new business class emerged. So this is pretty cool. You saw this. We talked about this in Britain already. You can go back to some of my videos on that, but the idea of historically there's a lot of people that are really really poor, and then there's a select few that are really really rich with no one really in between. Not a lot of people in between, I should say. But now you start to see as your banking system gets better, as your economies are starting to get more complex, as you have more global trade, you have people diffusing into this gap here. They're pulling out of here instead of this like stratified like here or here where it's very polar. You have this diffused, this grayscale, this ombre effect. Okay, and you're starting to see people in the business class. So they're not peasants. They're not the elite, but they're in that in between. They're like a tweener. For those of y'all that play tennis, it's like a tweener, right? In between, right? And then last and certainly not least, Chinese nationalism spreads. African nationalism, Indian nationalism, Chinese nationalism. Nationalism is a thing that is a huge influence. And by this point, this early 1900s, right when we had Teddy Roosevelt as our president, right after McKinley was assassinated. But anyway, in the 1900s, like you're going to see in about 14 years, nationalism, Serbian nationalism, sparked the First World War. Nationalism plays a huge role across the world. Like from here on, like if you think about it, you will see nationalism play a role in something. Um, so I think that's the final slide. I'm hoping this one works again. If you do have any questions, please let me know. I'm here to help you. And again, if you do have any concerns, or even if that's like you have concerns about getting your work in, or you have concerns about the quiz that is going to be coming up. If you have any of those concerns, please let me know so that I can answer them, because odds are if you have that concern, someone else does as well. Um, and yeah, so anyway, I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Y'all are excellent people. Keep it up. Keep up the hard work. You're doing great. And with that, Hakes